What's going on, everyone? David here, and welcome back to another video. And of course, Atlus just dropped a brand new trailer for Persona 3 Reload's Episode Aigis, a DLC that a lot of you guys are excited for, but there was a surprise alongside it. Previews came out, so a bunch of press outlets were able to play, from my understanding, the first hour or so of the DLC, and they had a lot to say. So today I'm going to try and find out, is it worth it? Did they fix some of the issues that most people who played the answer in Persona 3 FES on PS2 had? We're going to try and find out all about that today. So if you're into weekly RPG content, you're at the right place. Please consider subscribing. Otherwise, let's get right into it. And all the links to the articles that we'll look at together today are in the description. I strongly encourage you to support these outlets and to give the articles a read if you are interested. Alright, so I took previews from outlets that I trust, that I generally read their stuff whenever there are previews for games coming out and DLCs and all of that. And the first one is from Scott at RPG Fan. So here's what Scott had to say. Hands-on preview, the better the answer, interrogation mark, which is what we're trying to understand today. Thanks to the great people at Atlus, I recently had the privilege to try out a small portion of the upcoming DLC for Persona 3 Reload. Episode Aigis is often known by its original name, The Answer, which is what this section of this game is called in the PlayStation 2 Persona 3 FES release. It was essentially Persona 3 DLC before DLC was actually called DLC. An extra 20 to 30 hours tacked on to an already amazing game. Sign me up. The demo we got to play consisted of the opening sections of Episode Aigis, which included the first story segment and the subsequent first door of the Abyss of Time, which was up to the first boss. So they were able to play like early in the DLC, again, roughly an hour from my understanding. So there was only little time to play, but enough to get a sense of the direction they were going with this. As always, I will refrain from spoiling story segments as much as possible. Still, for the most part, the opening story section is almost a one-to-one recreation of the original, including the fight between Metis and Aigis, and a new version of the animated cutscene that plays after this fight. In fact, there will be all new animated cutscenes throughout Episode Aigis, including a new opening and ending. That is really awesome and very exciting to hear. After this, Aigis becomes the de facto main character for the DLC with all the powers the protagonist had in the original game, and thus begins the descent into the Abyss of Time. Some gameplay changes in Episode Aigis are apparent right off the bat. For one, the Twilight Clock is back from the base game, which was a new addition to Persona 3 Reload. So to heal, you'll need to collect those Twilight fragments to use the clock and open Twilight chests in the Abyss. Thankfully, they seem more plentiful than they did in the base game. The UI now is an Aigis style, which is really cool to see. Aigis has also many different on-field action abilities compared to the main character. She can lock onto enemies from a distance and fire upon them to engage in combat. That is really cool, and I watched a few reviews since they came out, and people are saying it's really cool because it changes the strategy when attacking demons on field. But when you're trying to gain items from chests and stuff like that, or when you need to destroy the little pillars that give you items, I don't recall what they're called, I'm sorry. Apparently it's a little long because the animation is long, you have to aim at the right place, a little bit clunky. So positive and negative for this one. I noticed it seemed more precise from far away, but when up close to any objects, it fires at a wide angle to help engage shadows that might creep up on you. I feel this will continue to be updated as the game progresses, just like you can get new abilities in the base game for the main character. One thing I couldn't check was if the compendium could be used in Episode Aigis, since I wasn't allowed back in the Velvet Room after the story segment. For those who do not know, one of the hardest and most annoying parts of the original The Answer is that I just never had access to the compendium, which made it pretty brutal to get the personas you needed for certain bosses. I believe that will change for Episode Aigis, especially since the theurgy attacks are tied to what personas you have unlocked. Also, because we were only able to play up to the first boss, we couldn't see any additions there might be to procuring items and equipments outside of the Abyss of Time. I have faith that much of this stuff will be readily available in Episode Aigis, as it seems the developers understood what made The Answer so annoying to play. So it seems like with what they had to play here at RPG Fan, it's kind of hard to tell, is it fixed, is it way different, or is it not? For now, it kind of seems like, hey, it's The Answer in Reload. It's not changed that much, at least for now. Visually better, of course, new tracks by Kazuka, which from the trailer sounds awesome, but other than that, there isn't much to go off of from the previews. It doesn't mean that it's not changed, but from the previews, hard to say, according to Scott. Now let's go over to Noisy Pixel here. Article by Orpheus Joshua. A fresh take on Aigis' journey. In all honesty, despite my grievances about how Reload's base game abolished select systems from the previous versions of Persona 3, I'm open to Episode Aigis embracing the baseline Reload instilled. The original implementation of the answer became a chore across lengthy play session. It's entirely a dungeon crawler with occasional cutscenes. The Persona 3 FES dungeon design was more attuned to the tiredness mechanic and segmented progression, so I didn't find it to fit the answer directions all too well. By contrast, the Tartarus design of Persona 3 Reload is far more lenient and less of a collective time sink for basic progression. This philosophy has increased over the doors within the new dungeon area, the Abyss of Time, which is basically an extension of what the base game provided. Summatively, if you enjoyed traversing Tartarus during the base game, Episode Aigis is unapologetically more of the same. Narrative-wise, this scenario is obviously very spoiler-heavy, so a deeper delve will be restrained from the eventual review. Still, I'm eager to witness this new voice cast approach this intense emotional struggle that differs across every party member. Speaking of, based on the opening scenes, the voice performance of the new character, Metis, is effective. The answer is one of my favorite Persona experiences due to its story and character writing alone, so I sincerely hope its later scenes are approached with finesse. A promising reimagining, Persona 3 Reload Episode Aigis has the potential to easily surpass the original version of the answer. In addition to the newly animated opening, revised dungeon exploration, and general gameplay alterations, the confirmation of new events centered around Metis and implementation of the Persona Compendium, which was absent in Persona 3 FES, implementation of the answer seems like a simple home run. For those of you in the same boat as me who somewhat are mixed on Persona 3 Reload's approach, certain gameplay and writing decisions, I firmly believe that Episode Aigis will pull you back in. So this reviewer here who previewed the answer is very positive on the answer, but then again, it was someone who really liked it originally. I really like to hear that, hey, if you like exploring Tartarus, it's more of the same. It's not going to be this gameplay loop that was in the original, which caused problems again because of the fatigue system and everything. So great stuff here by Noisy Pixel and Joshua. This next one is from PushSquare Robert Ramsey here. Persona 3 Reload's Episode Aigis remake will still divide opinion. Interesting. Let's give it a read. We write divisive because that's exactly what Persona 3 FES's epilogue continues to be close to 2 decades after its initial PlayStation 2 release. Without spoiling anything specific, the answer, as it was then called, dealt with the aftermath of Persona 3's main story. It further explored the Dark Hour and its impact on the core cast, which simultaneously spotlighting the party members that you had fought alongside throughout the game. It's the epilogue's treatment of these largely beloved characters that can rub fans the wrong way. And again, we've been assured that Episode Aigis won't make any notable changes to the plot's overall flow. If the answer pissed you off in the first place, you'll probably have a similar reaction to this reincarnation. And I think they're saying this in a story perspective for the most part. I might be wrong, but I think that's what they're saying here, because in terms of gameplay, it changed. It changed. We read that in previous previews. Much like Tartarus, this dungeon has randomized elements and a procedural layout. It's also stuffed with shadows, and so combat is pushed to the forefront for the whole excursion. Generally speaking, Episode Aigis has the feel of an endgame escapade, but you won't be carrying over any progress from the base release. Instead, everyone's pushed back to level 30 or so, and you'll need to start identifying enemy weaknesses from scratch. Not a problem at all, in my opinion. The expansion's asking a lot, especially if you've just spent 100-ish hours beating Reload, but structurally, it does stand apart from the main game with no social links in sight. Episode Aigis is basically a dungeon crawler, and it can be demanding one at that. Even back on the PlayStation 2, the answer would be cruel in a classic kind of Shin Megami Tensei sense, with enemies often taking full brutal advantage of a missed attack. That's Megaton for you, my friend. Based on what we played, the remake seems to retain that difficulty on the fundamental level, but Reload's own significantly overhauled combat system can obviously make things much more forgiving. As such, we're left wondering how the DLC's difficulty curve will pan out across its whole runtime, because the original FES version sported some infamously punishing opponents. So those are our previews for today. Persona 3 Reload Aigis episode, expansion pass, coming out September 10th if I'm not mistaken, all platforms but Nintendo, of course, where Reload is already playable. You can play the answer, or episode Aigis I should say. From what we read in the previews, I'm kind of still confused if I'm being honest. Is it better? Well, clearly it looks better, it's more fluid. Some of the elements that were problematic in the original P3 and in FES are now not a problem anymore because they were fixed in Reload, so therefore they're still fixed in the answer, but the answer itself in terms of gameplay and story is pretty much untouched. So what does that mean for the answer? You guys tell me. I mean, at this point, I have no idea if it's really worth it or not. I don't have an answer for y'all. It feels like this preview was too it was just too short and too segmented, so I don't know if it's really worth it or not. So we'll have to wait and see until it's finally out. There might be reviews for it coming out in a few days or weeks. We will see about that, but for now, we're left with just the same questions that we were left with beforehand. So that is it, but it's really looking good, it's sounding good, and hey, for those of you who are excited about this episode, I am happy for y'all. I'll be honest, there's too much coming out near it. I probably won't be there day one. I have a lot else to do. I need to finish Infinite Wealth, but and Metaphor's Rise coming out right after. But still, I am happy that this is a thing. I am happy that Persona 3 Reload will actually be the definitive version of Persona 3. So thank you all so much for watching today's video. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a great day. Bye.